Nicholas Weaver, Night over the Mega-Atom. In the galaxy, there were civilizations that built cities, domed gardens, oceanic stations, and scientific arches near the stars. And then there were others, those who knew how to create nothing but weapons, fear, and ash. The Varrag Empire had not known peace for generations. Its economy relied neither on labor, nor invention, nor trade, but on an endless advance. Its fleet moved from system to system, from planet to planet, like a pack of predators that had forgotten how to live without blood. They seized colonies, shattered defenses, looted energy hubs, hauled away rare resources, burned archives, murdered those who resisted, and stole children. They didn't just take the children, they broke them, stripped them of their memories of home, and raised them as obedient pawns for new wars. To the Varrag, 1,000,000 fallen soldiers was not a tragedy, it was merely a line in a supply report. Their command thought not in human lives, but in military mass, volume of loot, and the number of planets left to bring to their knees. Their ideology was simple and brutal. The weak are a resource. Those who do not submit are targets. This time they had chosen Iara 4. The planet lay in the warm equatorial belt of its star system. It breathed with moisture, thunderstorms, dense forests, and steam. Between oceans of dark green jungles rose metropolises, industrial ridges, transport towers, and mining complexes that extracted rare earth elements for half of the known cosmos. But the true heart of Iara was neither industry nor spaceports. The heart was the Hara Mega-Atomic Station. The colossal energy complex powered the cities, agricultural zones, climate control systems, the orbital shield, and the planetary anti-air defense. As long as Hara Kyra functioned, Iara 4 could withstand a siege, a storm, a crisis, or even a partial blockade. If the station lost control or was shut down, the planet's outer defensive perimeter would go blind. The orbital shield would flicker out, the AA batteries would fall silent, and then a path would open through the atmosphere for the main enemy fleet. This was exactly what the Varrag planned. Not a frontal assault, not a fair fight, a stab in the back. According to intelligence, enemy strategists decided to act under the cover of commercial traffic. A freighter officially carrying industrial equipment and food containers received legal clearance to dock at Iara 4's spaceport. The documents were perfect, the flight history was clean, the transponder signal was authentic. But inside, behind the double walls of cargo modules, and within the pressurized voids between container sections, landing pods lay hidden. Inside them waited Varrag assault teams, highly trained saboteurs equipped for hacking, sabotage, and the swift, forceful seizure of massive technical facilities. Their orders were to infiltrate the Kyra station area, break inside, seize or disable key energy hubs, and collapse the planet's defense grid for at least a few minutes. A few minutes. For a peaceful planet, that would be enough for the sky to become an open wound. Then, the main aggressor forces would enter the system. Landing barges, heavy strike cruisers, and orbital suppression batteries. After that, the typical Varrag war would begin. The bombardment of cities, armored infantry breaking through surviving districts, mass executions, looting, and deportations. They didn't just want victory, they wanted an example. Another world broken so demonstratively that others would fear to resist. But the state to which Iara 4 belonged was not weak. The union of free worlds grew not from plunder, but from treaties, science, mutual defense, and respect for human dignity. Here, life was not devalued for sake of posturing strength.
Children were not raised for war, and politics were not built on a cult of violence. However, peacefulness did not mean defenselessness. Space was too vast and too dangerous to afford the luxury of naivety. Thus, around the Union's worlds stood powerful fleets, multi-layered shields, early warning systems, and troops ready to act with speed and precision. When intelligence intercepted fragments of coded transmissions and linked them to suspicious activity in the Ayara 4 spaceport, the Union's military and political leadership convened an emergency meeting. Silence reigned in the underground hall of Strategic Command, the kind of silence found only where decisions are measured not in words, but in thousands of potential deaths. Above the round table, a volumetric model of the planet glowed. Cities, transport arteries, thunderstorm fronts, defensive lines, and in the center, the pulsing energy hub of the Kyra station. Not just a power station, the energy hub of the entire continent. If it were stopped, the planet wouldn't perish immediately, but the loss of the outer shield and main defensive perimeters would open the sky. And when the sky is open, war from orbit ceases to be a fight and becomes a slaughter. An outline of the enemy landing force flashed on the tactical scheme. The aggressor acted in an old, dirty, yet effective way. Under the cover of a merchant vessel that entered the spaceport with legal cargo, they had introduced hidden pods with soldiers into the container sections. The landing force dispersed before the control service realized the merchant ship had too many blind zones in its cargo manifest. Now the enemy groups were moving through the jungle towards Kyra, using local storm fronts and thermal noise of industrial zones to hide from standard scanning. 50 kilometers west of the station, Arson said calmly, drop in an unpopulated sector, radio silence until contact. Objective, find, confirm, destroy. If the enemy has already entered Kyra, intercept and liquidate on site. The main thing is to prevent them from reaching the central energy ring. And if they didn't come to turn it off, but to blow it up? Olena asked quietly. Lada looked at the hologram of Ayara 4. Not blow it up, they want control. Kyra has a thorium cycle with molten salts and 3 levels of passive quenching. You can't trigger a quick nuclear explosion there with immense stupidity, but you can knock out the phase regulators, force the reactor park into emergency cooling, and crash the grid. 8 minutes of sagging is enough for the orbital shield to fail. The bay jolted slightly. The pilot's voice crackled in their helmets, dry and clear. 2 minutes to the drop window. Arson stood first. The others followed. Helmets locked with a short hiss. Interfaces came alive on the inner glass. Pulse, wind, terrain, allies, ammo count, stormfront prognoses. Strato assault packs unfolded on their backs, combined systems with heat shielding plates, guided stabilizers, and vector microturbines on oxygen reserves. At high altitude, they didn't fly in the usual sense. At first, they fell in a controlled glide, bleeding speed with aerodynamic flaps, and only lower in denser air would they engage turbo thrust for horizontal approach. It wasn't spectacular. It was reliable. The hatch opened. The night rushed into the bay as a warm, humid darkness. Somewhere below, beneath thick layers of clouds, the forests of Ayara glittered with flashes of lightning. There could be no smell here, but the brain still filled in the gaps with the scent of wet metal, ozone, and vegetable decay. Arson stepped into the black abyss first. 4 others followed.
A fall into darkness always feels longer than the timer shows. Even when you see the speed digits, the vectors, the angle of attack, even when you understand all the laws of motion, the body still remembers the ancient terror of heights. The wind slammed into their chests, then suddenly vanished as the group entered the cloud layer.
Raindrops drummed against their helmets like handfuls of small stones. Below, the green outlines of trees flickered to life. At an altitude of 3 kilometers, the packs fully deployed. The micro-turbines kicked in with a short, bassy thrum, transitioning the fall into a gliding flight. 5 dark figures passed over the jungle like a silent arrow. The landing was hard but clean. They touched down in a wide clearing between the buttress roots of giant trees that soared to the height of 20-story buildings. The forest immediately smothered them in sound, not one, but hundreds of layers of it. The incessant hiss of leaves on leaves, the low hum of nocturnal insects, short, abrupt cries somewhere in the canopy, occasionally a distant thud, as if someone were dropping logs into the mud. The air was thick as water. Heat crawled under their armor, condensation gathered on the joints. "Passive channel," Arson whispered. "No lights." Taras was already kneeling by the soft, indented soil. His glove touched the muck, then he raised 2 fingers to his helmet. Markers popped up on the tactical display. 8, no 10, passed through no more than 40 minutes ago, carrying heavy equipment. One carrier drone was dragging its left stabilizer. The trail is crooked. They were moving fast, no stops. "To the station?" Lada asked. "Yes, but here's something interesting." He pointed to a smear of dark slime on the bark of a tree. The lens zoomed in. Not grease, not a fuel stain, a biological secretion. Local fauna was following them, something big. Demyan gave a quiet snort. "Wonderful. I love it when we have 2 enemies at once." They moved out. The forest didn't just resist, it felt as if it were trying to vomit the strangers out. Roots protruded from the earth like veins of stone. Vines snagged on equipment. The trees were encrusted with phosphorescent fungi that glowed with a dim bluish light, which at times made the soldiers' silhouettes look unnaturally flat, like paper cutouts. In several places, Taras halted the group with a single gesture. Colonies of transparent, gas-filled sacks hung from the trunks. They shivered from the footsteps, and the sensor showed a high concentration of highly flammable volatile compounds. "Don't fire here," he said dryly. "1 pulse and this whole section goes up." An hour later, they stumbled upon the first of the dead. 3 enemy paratroopers lay in the fern thickets, torn apart with such force it looked like an industrial shredder had fallen on them. Their armor was peeled open. One helmet had been crushed into the chest. Even Demyan stopped joking. "Not our work," Elena said, kneeling beside them. "Died about 20 minutes ago." Taras stared into the darkness between the trees. "I told you, someone was following them." The forest answered those words with a soft rustle. Not loud, not threatening. On the contrary, it was almost delicate. That is how something very large moves when it has no need to hurry. They saw the creature only when it was already close. The thermal grid didn't catch it immediately because its body temperature almost matched the air. Only when it changed its angle to the ground did its contour flare up on the display. The animal looked like a cross between a cat, an eel, and an insect. A long, muscular body with 6 low limbs, skin covered with wet, dark scales that reflected the fungal light with green glimmers. A head without visible eyes, but the entire front section was peppered with locator slits. It didn't roar, it didn't hiss, it just kept coming. And then, from the sides, almost silently, 2 more emerged. "Electrosensitive," Lada said quickly, glancing at her scanner. "They see our batteries." "Back away slowly," Arson ordered. The first one lunged without warning. Demyan took the hit on his left armor plate, and even through the servos, he was thrown back against a root. Elena fired a short burst from her sniper module in close quarters mode, but the energy pulse only seared a slippery furrow along its spine. The creature flinched, but it didn't fall. "Not plasma," Taras shouted. "Nerve clusters at the base of the neck." Arson reacted faster than thought. 2 shots from his rail carbine and heavy ferromagnetic needles, accelerated by the magnetic field, pierced the creature through. It slammed into a tree so hard the fungi shook. The second one lunged at Lada, knocking her off her feet. Demyan covered them both with his body, fired almost point blank, and the recoil of the rifle thudded dully in the damp air. The third one retreated into the darkness. And then Taras vanished. He didn't actually vanish. His marker on the tactical map just lurched sideways into the thicket, and a short, stifled cry rang in their helmets. Arson and Elena dashed after him, hacking through vines. They found him in 10 seconds, but those 10 seconds were enough. Taras lay on his back, and above him, almost invisible in the shadows, writhed another creature, smaller but faster. It had managed to punch a claw through the gap under his armor's armpit. Elena killed it with a single shot to the neck cluster. When they turned Taras over, he was still breathing, shallowly, with blood in his mask. "Venom," he said very calmly, as if delivering someone else's unimportant news. Elena was already injecting a broad-spectrum antidote and connecting a purification cascade, but Arson saw in her eyes what she hadn't said yet. The local toxin wasn't protein-based, it was mineral-organic, with electrochemical nerve conduction blocking. The universal antidote slowed the effect, but didn't break the mechanism.
"How long?" Arson asked quietly. Taras answered himself. 20 minutes. Maybe 30. They went through the ravine. The ground is drier there. And one more thing. He swallowed blood. The enemy split up. Part of them is a decoy. The main group is already at the station. He looked at Arson clearly, without fear. "Don't drag me. You won't make it." Under the rain, everything sounded muffled, as if through thick glass. Demyan turned away. Lada clenched her fist so hard her glove's exoskeleton creaked. Elena was still working, not because she believed, but because her hands didn't know how to give up before her heart did. Taras died in 7 minutes. They hid his body in a root hollow, sealed it with emergency thermal film, and set a crypto-protected beacon for evacuation. The forest immediately began to swallow the site again, with rain, steam, and the rustle of leaves, as if nothing had happened. But it had. Now there were 4. They moved faster after that, not because they were in a rush, but because it was too late to save their strength. 20 kilometers from the station, they intercepted an enemy relay disguised as a fallen container. Lada cracked it in 3 minutes. On the hologram, flickering from atmospheric interference, the layout of Kira flared up. "They have the internal schematics," she said. "Someone sold the data, or leaked it long ago. 2 groups are already inside. Their target is phase hall number 3 and the cooling main. If they knock out the grid synchronization, the shield will fail in a cascade across the continent." "How much time?" Demyan asked. Lada paused, calculating. "No more than 40 minutes. They saw the station through the rain like a glowing city in the middle of the jungle. Kira did not look like the old nuclear plants of the past. No smokestacks, no concrete cubes. Several giant heat exchange towers covered in shimmering ceramics soared above the forest, along with ring-shaped power blocks connected by transparent conduits. A blue haze hung in the night air above the station, ionization from high-power bus bars. Normally, it was a beautiful sight. Now it felt anxious. Some of the circuits were blinking like a heart that had lost its rhythm. The outer security was already dead. The bodies lay neatly, almost haphazardly, the work of professionals who wasted no motion. "They didn't come in as fodder, even if their empire treats them as such," Arson said quietly. "They infiltrated through a service cooling collector. It was hot, loud, and cramped. The pumps hummed so loudly that words had to be spoken directly into the helmet channel.
A carrier fluid, glowing amber behind protective layers, flowed through the pipes. Lada led them through a labyrinth of technical shafts, using the stolen schematic and her own intuition. Twice they saw dead technicians. One had managed to reach for an alarm button, but he was killed before the system could broadcast the signal to the general network. Near Phase Hall number 3, an ambush awaited them. The enemy was positioned expertly, 2 above on a mounting truss, 3 behind service blocks, and 1 operator with a jamming device. The first shot would have killed Arson if Demyan hadn't shoved him aside and taken the rail dart in his chest plate. The plate cracked, and Demyan fell to his knees, but stayed alive. Then began the things such groups exist for, not a beautiful battle, but short, terrifying work on the edge of reflex. Olena took out the top shooter the moment he shifted position. Arson rolled under the truss and sank 3 needles into the operator's cover. Lada released a swarm of micro-drones across the floor, and they blinded the enemy's thermal sights with a cloud of nanofoil. Demyan, breathing heavily, raised his rifle, and with 1 long shot, tore through a service block along with the 2 opponents behind it. When it went quiet, 1 enemy officer remained alive. He lay clutching his shot side, looking at them with that cold hatred found only in people for whom the lives of others are a resource. "Too late," he hissed. "The main team is already at the core." Arson didn't waste words. In the central energy ring, it was bright as day. Under a dome as high as a cathedral, magnetic suspension regulators rotated. In the center, behind a multi-layered screen, the heart of the grid pulsed. Not the reactor itself, but the power distribution control hub that linked the station's blocks to the planetary defense. If its synchronization was severed, the cities would still have reserves, but the SHIELD and AA would not. "I can hack the current manually," Lada said, already running toward the service console. "But I need 2 minutes. You have 90 seconds. The final fight was the worst. The enemy also realized time was up and threw everything they had. Railfire tracers tore through the air in thin white flashes. Protective fields sparked. One of the enemy paratroopers lunged at Arson with a monoblade, a weapon that sliced through armor using molecular coating and ultrasonic edge. They collided almost point blank, like beasts. Arson managed to intercept the wrist, but the enemy was strong and fanatically indifferent to pain. Demyan, already swaying from blood loss, slammed into the opponent with his shoulder, sending both crashing into the railing. Arson shot the enemy from half a meter. Olena worked the distant targets with such cold precision that even the helmet sensors couldn't keep up with her intent, only the result. 1, 2, 3. But a 4th enemy shooter hit Olena. The plate on her thigh split. Olena fell, but didn't drop her rifle. She continued to fire, sitting, pressing an auto tourniquet to the wound.
"Lada!" Arson shouted. 10 seconds! And then from the opposite side of the ring, the last enemy commander stepped out. Tall, in black modular armor, with a face that seemed too calm amidst the chaos. These are the men who order cities to be burned without raising their voices. He was in no hurry. He knew the inductor had almost finished its work. Arson fired first. The enemy ducked as if he had expected it. The needle only grazed his helmet. In response, he fired a short burst. 1 needle passed through Arson's forearm. His arm went numb almost immediately. "Now!" Lada screamed. The lights in the hall flickered out for a moment. Not completely, only for a fraction of a second, just long enough for the system to take the false impulse from the inductor as noise and discard it as an emergency anomaly. The regulators overhead began to hum differently, clean, steady, as if a massive mechanism had finally taken a proper breath. On Arson's tactical display, the status flashed: planetary shield, synchronization restored. The enemy commander understood instantly, and at that very moment, Olena, half lying by the console, put a bullet through his throat. He fell, without a word. Silence doesn't come immediately after a battle. First, there is a numbness in which the world exists in fragments, hot metal under a palm, the smell of ozone, blood in a sleeve, and somewhere far away, the alarm signals of a security system that had finally woken up. Then silence does come, but it is different. It is always heavy. They didn't all survive. Taras remained in the jungle. Demyan sat with his back against a service pedestal, pale but alive. Olena had stripped the torn plate from her thigh and, wincing in pain, was injecting him with coagulants before doing the same for herself. Lotta still stood by the console, her palm resting on the warm metal as if she couldn't believe the station had actually held. Within a few minutes, new signs lit up in the sky outside. The AA batteries, never having shut down, locked on to suspicious objects in orbit. The shield over the planet closed fully again, invisible but as real as gravity. The enemy fleet would have to either retreat or face a head-on collision with a full-strength defense. The treacherous blow had failed. Arsen stepped out onto Kira's observation bridge. The night was already brightening at the edges. The rain hadn't stopped, but there was something cleansing in its sound now. Beyond the forests, beyond the industrial towers, hundreds of kilometers away, the city lived on, unaware of how close the darkness had come. He stood in silence until Lotta joined him. "We stopped them," she said. Arsen looked at the sky, where the pale glow of the orbital shield was barely discernible through the clouds. This time. He knew, as all soldiers of the border worlds know, empires built on plunder do not retreat forever. They regroup, they study their mistakes, they look for a new loophole, a new merchant ship, a new way to strike in the back. But he knew something else. As long as there are those ready to fall from the sky into the darkness of a foreign planet for the sake of people they have never met, such empires will never find easy prey. The rain fell over Yara 4, over the jungles, over the metropolises, over the giant station that continued to power the world. And in that rain, in the hum of the machines, in the distant roll of thunder, there was no longer helplessness. There was a warning. The enemy does not sleep, but neither do those who stand against them.